The photographer arrived on a Tuesday morning in May 1902. He stood at the edge of a Section 14 and looked up at what everyone in Coulter County now called the Hartwell Ridge. Green. 20 years before this slope had been a graveyard. Stumps, mud, nothing. Now it was a forest. Aspen and cottonwood rising 30 feet high. Willows thick along channels of clear water. Young pines scattered like promises across the hillside. The photographer asked the woman standing beside him how she'd done it. Elena Hartwell, 48 years old. Her hands scarred from 2 decades of work, looked at him and said something he didn't expect. I didn't do it. The roots did. I just remembered what they'd forgotten. She paused. That they were still alive. The photographer wanted the story. The whole story. So Elena told him. Not the version the newspapers would print later. Not the one about the widow who grew a forest from nothing. The true one. It started 20 years earlier. Spring of 1882. When Elena Hartwell buried her husband and her 6-year-old daughter in the same week and decided she couldn't stay in a place where everything reminded her of what she'd lost. The typhoid came in February. Thomas first, then Emma. 6 days apart. Elena had nursed them both in the cabin they built together near the abandoned diggings outside Virginia City, the cabin with the window facing east. The one Thomas had positioned so Emma could see the sunrise from her bed. She'd done everything right. Clean water, cool compresses, willow bark tea, everything her mother had taught her. Nothing worked. Thomas went on a Thursday. Fever took him in the night while Elena held his hand and felt his pulse slow. Stop. Emma followed the next Wednesday. Smaller. Lighter. Gone even faster. Elena dug the graves herself. The ground was frozen. She had to build fires on the dirt first. Wait for the earth to thaw enough to break with the shovel. It took 3 days. No one came to help. The nearest neighbor was 12 miles away and they'd heard about the sickness. People didn't come near typhoid. So Elena buried her family alone. And when it was done, when the last stone was placed on Emma's grave, she stood there and looked at the homestead. 4 years of work. The orchard Thomas had planted. The fence they'd built. The garden plot where Emma had grown her first pumpkin. All of it. Still there. Still standing. Like nothing had happened. That was the part Elena couldn't bear. The world didn't stop. Didn't even slow down. It just kept going. Which meant she had to decide whether to keep going with it. She packed what fit in one trunk. Clothes, tools, seeds saved from last year's garden, Thomas's pocket watch, Emma's wooden doll, a leather journal her mother had given her years ago, blank pages, waiting, and she left. Sold the homestead to a cattle company for half what it was worth. The buyer knew she was desperate, knew she'd take anything. She took it. The mail coach heading north left on a Monday morning. Elena climbed aboard with her trunk and didn't look back. Couldn't. If she looked back, she might not leave. And if she didn't leave, she'd spend the rest of her life walking past Emma's empty bed every morning and Thomas's empty chair every night. So she looked forward. At the road. At the mountains in the distance. at anything but behind. The dog. The dog found her at the first stop, halfway to Bozeman, a trading post where the horses got water and the passengers got coffee that tasted like dirt. Elena was sitting on a bench outside, eating dried venison she didn't taste. And this dog just walked up, gray, long-legged, part shepherd, part something wilder, thin, limping, one ear torn. She sat down 2 feet away and looked at Elena, not begging, just looking. Elena tore off a piece of venison, held it out. The dog took it, gentle, like she'd been taught manners once. When the coach left, the dog followed. The driver said no animals. Elena said nothing, just climbed aboard. The dog stayed below, running behind the coach, keeping pace. 5 miles, 10, 20. At the next stop, the driver looked at Elena. "That your dog?" "No." "She thinks she is." Elena looked down. The dog was lying in the shade of the coach wheel, panting, waiting. Something in Elena's chest tightened. "I don't have food for a dog." The driver shrugged. "She's been feeding herself this long." He paused. "Looks to me like she's decided you're hers, not the other way around." Elena stared at the dog. The dog stared back. Amber eyes. Steady. And Elena thought, fine. Fine. If this creature wants to follow someone with nothing left to give, that's her choice. She let the dog onto the coach, named her Ash, because that's what Elena felt like inside. Ash. Coulter County looked like every other Montana valley Elena had seen from the coach window. Creek running through the bottom, wagon road following the water, homesteads scattered along the flat ground, and ridges. Always ridges, rising on both sides of the valley like walls. The coach stopped in Garnet Falls on a Wednesday afternoon. Population maybe 300. One main street, feed store, general store, saloon, livery, and a land office, small, wooden. Sign out front said Territorial Land Office, claims processed here. Elena paid for a room above the feed store, $1 a week. The room had a bed, a chair, a window that looked out at the back alley where men loaded grain sacks onto wagons. She set her trunk down. Ash curled up in the corner, and Elena sat on the edge of the bed and tried to figure out what came next. She had $73 left from the homestead sale, enough for maybe 3 months, 4 if she was careful. After that, nothing. She could find work, mending, laundry, cooking, the kind of work widows did when they had no other choice. Or she could claim land. The Homestead Act said any citizen could claim 160 acres of public land. Work it for 5 years. Prove it up. Then it was yours. Free. Women could claim. Widows especially. Elena had done it before with Thomas. Built a homestead from nothing. But the thought of doing it again, alone, planting things that would take years to grow, when she couldn't even imagine next week. She didn't know. Didn't know if she had another homestead in her, but she knew one thing. Sitting still felt like dying, and she'd already buried enough death. The land office opened at 8. Elena was there at 7:30, waiting on the steps with Ash at her feet. The clerk arrived at 7:45. Thin man, spectacles. Name was Eldon Pace. He unlocked the door and looked at Elena. "You're early. I need to see what's available." He gestured inside. The office was one room, desk, filing cabinets, maps on the walls. Big maps, sectioned into squares. Eldon pulled out a ledger, looking for what size claim 160. Agricultural or grazing? Elena hesitated. She didn't know yet, hadn't decided. Agricultural. Eldon nodded, opened the ledger, started reading. "We've got parcels along Muskrat Creek. Good bottomland, gentle slope. Already got 12 families claimed down there since spring opened." He pointed to the map. Elena looked, saw the creek, the flat land on both sides, the kind of ground you could plow, plant, build on, the kind of land that made sense. And something in her stomach turned. No, that wasn't right. She didn't want easy land. Didn't want the kind of place where everything worked. Because nothing worked. Thomas had worked. Emma had worked. And they were still dead. Easy didn't mean safe. She looked at the map again. Her eyes went up. To the ridges. What about there? She pointed to the eastern ridge, high above the creek. Eldon followed her finger. His face changed. Section 14. Yes. He took off his spectacles, cleaned them, put them back on, like he was checking to make sure he'd heard right. "Ma'am, that section's been cut over." "I know. Coulter Timber Company stripped it 2 years back. Took every marketable tree off the slope." "I know. There's nothing up there but stumps and mud." Elena looked at him. "I'd like to see the plot description anyway." Eldon stared at her for a long moment. Then he pulled out the paperwork. Section 14. 160 acres. Eastern ridge above Muskrat Creek. Previously timbered. Currently vacant. Available for claim. He set the papers on the desk. "You sure about this? I'd like to walk it first." "Walk it?" "Yes." Eldon shook his head. But he marked down her name, Elena Hartwell, intent to inspect Section 14. She left the office and went to the livery. Asked about the trail up to the ridge. The man working there. Big. Bearded. Looked at her like she'd asked directions to the moon. "You want to go up to the Coulter lot?" "Yes." "Ain't nothing up there worth seeing." "I'll decide that." He shrugged. Told her how to find the trail. Elena went back to her room, changed into her work boots, packed water and bread in a canvas bag, and she climbed. The trail switchbacked up the ridge, steep. Ash ran ahead, then circled back, then ran ahead again, like she couldn't decide whether to lead or follow. Elena climbed steady. Her legs burned. Her breath came short. But she didn't stop. An hour up. The trail leveled out onto the shoulder of the ridge, and Elena stopped because the liveryman was right. There was nothing here. Stumps, hundreds of them, scattered across the slope like grave markers, some 3 feet wide, some 5, cut low to the ground, flat tops already graying from 2 years of weather. The ground between them was torn up, deep ruts carved into the dirt where logging crews had dragged timber down to the creek. Some of the ruts were 2 feet deep, filled with standing water from snowmelt. No trees, no canopy, just open sky, bare ground, silence. The wind came across the ridge without anything to slow it down, cold, even in April. Elena stood there, and for a moment, just a moment, she felt something close to recognition. This place looked how she felt inside. Stripped, empty, scarred. Everything taken away. Ash came and sat beside her, leaning against Elena's leg, and Elena crouched down, put her hand on the nearest stump. The wood was rough, weathered, but not rotten. She looked closer, at the base, where the stump met the ground, and she saw it. Green, thin shoots, maybe 6 inches tall, growing from the root collar. New growth, from a stump everyone thought was dead. Elena's heart thumped. She moved to the next stump. Same thing. Shoots, small, but alive. Not every stump. Maybe 1 in 4. But enough. Enough to mean something. And then Elena remembered. Something her mother had taught her. Years ago, back in Pennsylvania, Elena was 12. Her mother, Annika, took her into the woods behind their farmhouse. It was autumn, leaves falling. Annika knelt beside a stump, an old oak, cut years before Elena was born. But from the base, green saplings, growing in a ring around the old trunk. "You see this?" Annika said. Elena nodded. "The tree you see above ground, that is only half. The half below, the roots, that is bigger." And it remembers. She pulled back the leaf litter, showed Elena the white root threads spreading through the soil. In the old country, in Germany, we do not kill trees. We work with them. We cut the trunk, but we leave the roots alive. And the roots, they send up new growth, faster, stronger, because the root system is already there, already mature, already hungry for light. "Coppicing," Annika said. "It is the way forests were managed for centuries." She looked at Elena. "You never kill the roots. You work with them." Elena stood on Section 14, surrounded by stumps everyone thought were dead, and she understood. The roots were still there, still alive, still trying to grow back. The Coulter Timber Company had taken the trunks, but they hadn't killed the trees. Not all of them. The forest was trying to heal itself. It just needed help. Elena walked the ridge for 3 hours. She counted the living stumps. She looked at the ruts, The way they ran down slope. The way water was pooling in them instead of sheeting off. Accidental water retention. She touched the soil, still thin, but not gone. She looked at the view from up here. You could see the whole valley, the creek shining below, the wagon road, the homesteads. You could see weather coming from 50 miles away. And at night, you'd see stars. Elena sat down on the biggest stump she could find, a ponderosa base, 4 feet across. Ash lay at her feet, and Elena made her decision. This was the place, not in spite of the stumps, because of them, because this land understood what she understood. That being broken doesn't mean being finished. She filed the claim the next morning. Eldon looked at the paperwork like it personally offended him. You walked it 3 times, and you still want it. Yes. He stamped the papers, shook his head. Mrs. Hartwell, I hope you know what you're doing. So do I. Word spread fast. By that evening, everyone in Garnet Falls knew. The widow from the mail coach claimed the Coulter lot. The reaction was predictable. At the general store, the women whispered, "Poor thing. Probably doesn't know better. Someone should tell her. Tell her what, that she just claimed a graveyard." At the saloon, the men laughed. Marcus Webb, rancher, owned 200 acres of good grazing land south of the wagon road. He said it plain. She bought stumps. Samuel Pierce owned a quarter section of creek bottom. He laughed, added, "She'll be gone by winter." No one disagreed, except Marcus Webb's daughter, Cora, 14 years old, quiet, watchful. She'd lost her mother 3 years back. Illness, fast, and since then, Cora had been somewhere else, even when she was standing right in front of you. She heard the men talking, heard them laugh about the widow on the ridge, and something in Cora stirred. That night, she asked her father about Section 14. Why'd the timber company leave it? Marcus looked up from his ledger. Because they took what they wanted. Trees. Rest wasn't worth the trouble. So it's just empty, full of stumps. Cora thought about that. Can things grow from stumps? Marcus frowned. Not that I've seen. But Cora wasn't sure he'd been looking. Elena moved onto the ridge in late April. She didn't have lumber for a cabin yet. So she pitched a canvas tent, Army surplus, 8 by 10, heavy enough to hold against wind. She set it up beside the big ponderosa stump, the 4-foot one. Used the stump as a table, a workbench, a seat. Her first night on the ridge. She sat there as the sun went down, ash at her feet, the valley below turning gold, then purple, then dark, and Elena sat in the silence. No Thomas beside her, no Emma sleeping in the next room, just wind, stars, space, so much space. It should have felt lonely. It did feel lonely. But it also felt right. Like maybe, just maybe, this was where she was supposed to be. The work started the next morning. Elena didn't try to farm the ridge, didn't plow, didn't plant wheat or oats. Instead, she began to clear, not the stumps. The stumps stayed, but the debris, broken limbs, dried slash, woody tangle the logging crews had left behind. All of it, choking the living stumps, blocking sunlight from the new shoots. Elena worked with a hand axe and a brush hook, dragging the dead material into piles at the edge of the slope, burning what she could when the wind was still, stacking the rest into low walls along the contour of the hill. Not random, deliberate, perpendicular to the direction water would flow. Each wall, a small barrier, not enough to stop a flood, but enough to slow the sheet of rainwater, give it time to soak in instead of run off. Her mother had taught her this too. In Germany, they called it erosion control. In Montana, Elena just called it common sense. Cora Webb came to the ridge on a Saturday, told her father she was going to check the fence line on the north pasture. Instead, she climbed the switchback trail, found Elena halfway up the slope, dragging brush. Ash saw Cora first, lifted her head, ears forward. Elena turned, saw a girl, thin, dark hair, standing at the edge of the work site, watching. Elena straightened. "You lost?" Cora shook her head. "Just looking." "At what?" "What you're doing." Elena wiped sweat from her forehead. "I'm clearing brush." "Why?" "Because it's in the way." Cora stepped closer, looked at the stump beside Elena, at the green shoots growing from the base. "That's alive." "Yes." "I thought stumps were dead." "Most people do." Cora crouched down, touched one of the shoots. "Careful, like it might break." "How?" Elena set down her brush hook, knelt beside the girl. "The roots are still there, underground, still drawing water, still waiting." She pointed to the chute. "When the canopy gets removed, when the tree gets cut, the roots don't die right away. They try to send up new growth. It's called coppicing." Cora looked at Elena. "You're going to grow trees here. I'm going to help them grow themselves." Cora thought about that. "My father says you won't make it through winter." Elena smiled. Small. "Your father might be right. But you're trying anyway." "Yes." Cora stood, looked at the ridge, at the stumps, at the sky. "Can I come back?" Elena studied the girl, saw something in her eyes, something familiar. Loneliness, loss, the kind that doesn't have words. "You can come back." Cora nodded and left. Elena watched her go. Ash whined, soft. "I know," Elena said. "Me too." May turned to June. The work continued. Elena deepened the skid trail ruts, turned them into shallow holding ponds, some no bigger than a washtub, others 6 feet across and a foot deep. She lined the bottoms with flat stones, carried from a talus field on the north side of the ridge. back-breaking work, each stone heavy, sharp, her hands blistered, then calloused. When the spring rains came, the ponds filled, held, and when the sun came out, the water seeped slowly into the soil around them, feeding the root systems of the stumps nearby. By mid-June, Elena planted willows. She cut stakes from the creek bottom, green, thumb-thick, each about 3 feet long, and drove them into the soft ground along the edges of her water channels. Willows root fast. Within 2 weeks, the stakes were leafing out, sending hair-thin roots into the wet soil, binding it together, holding the banks of the channels in place. Living infrastructure. Between the stumps, Elena broadcast seed, wild red clover mostly, mixed with a little vetch. The clover wasn't for harvest, it was for the soil. Clover fixes nitrogen, breaks up compacted ground. Its leaves, when they fall and rot, feed the earth. Her mother had called it soil medicine. Elena called it hope. Cora came back the next Saturday, and the Saturday after that. She didn't ask permission, just showed up, watched Elena work. Sometimes Elena explained what she was doing. Sometimes they worked in silence. Cora learned how to stack brush walls, how to tell which stumps were alive and which were dead, how to walk the contour of the slope so you understood where water would go. Marcus Webb noticed his daughter leaving on Saturdays. Noticed she came back with dirt under her fingernails. Noticed she seemed lighter. He didn't stop her. His daughter had been sad for 3 years. If the widow on the ridge gave her something to do, he wasn't going to interfere. Summer in Montana is short. By July, the clover was blooming, red flowers scattered between the stumps. The willow stakes had grown a foot. The holding ponds held water even when the creek below ran low. People in Garnet Falls occasionally saw Elena on the ridge, moving among the stumps with her brush hook and seed bag. Ash patrolling the perimeter. They shook their heads. She's gardening a graveyard. Waste of time. She'll quit when winter comes. Elena heard none of it, and wouldn't have cared if she had. She wasn't doing this for them. She was doing it because the work kept her hands busy, because watching things grow gave her something to care about that wasn't already dead, because every morning when she woke up in the tent and saw the stumps sending up new shoots, she remembered. That broken doesn't mean finished. August. The heat came. Dry. Relentless. The kind that cracks ground and makes tempers short. Elena's holding ponds dropped. But they didn't dry completely. The water she'd collected in spring, stored in the soil, slow released through summer. The stump shoots grew 3 feet, 4 feet, 5. Straight, fast, fed by root systems that were 30, 40 years old. Aspen, cottonwood, reaching for the sun. Deer found the clover, grazed it to the ground in one corner. Elena spent 2 weeks building brush fences to keep them out. Until the plants were established, Cora helped. They worked side by side, cutting branches, weaving them into barriers. And Cora asked, quiet, "Do you miss them?" Elena stopped, knew without asking who Cora meant. Every day. Does it get better? Elena looked at the girl, thought about lying, decided not to. No, it gets different. Cora nodded, like she'd expected that answer. I dream about my mother sometimes, and when I wake up, I forget she's gone, just for a second. And then I remember, and it's like losing her again. Elena's throat tightened. I know. They went back to work, but something had shifted between them. Understanding. The kind you don't need to explain. September arrived. The aspen leaves started turning. Gold, shimmering in the wind. The ridge, still mostly stumps, but green now. Patches of it. Young trees. Willow thickets. Clover. Not a forest yet, but the beginning of one. Elena stood on the big ponderosa stump one evening, watching the sun go down, and she thought, I did this. No, we did this. The roots, the rain, the soil. I just helped. Ash nudged her hand. Elena scratched behind the dog's ears. We're going to make it, she said. Ash's tail wagged. Once, like she'd known all along. October. The first hard frost. Elena woke to find ice on the water bucket outside the tent. Winter was coming. She needed a cabin. She'd been putting it off, because building a cabin meant staying, meant committing to this place for more than just a season. But the tent wouldn't hold through Montana winter. So, she started cutting logs, not from the ridge. She wouldn't touch the living stumps. Instead, she dragged deadfall up from the creek bottom. Pine, fir, already seasoned. Cora helped when she could. Marcus noticed. Rode up one Saturday morning. Found his daughter and Elena notching logs. He sat on his horse, watching. Finally said, You building a cabin? Elena looked up. Yes. You know winter's 6 weeks out. I know. Marcus dismounted, walked over to the log pile, looked at Elena's work. The notches were clean, precise. He grunted. You know how to build. My husband taught me. Marcus nodded. Didn't ask where her husband was. Didn't need to. You'll need a ridgepole and roofing. I'll manage. Marcus looked at his daughter, at the way Cora was watching him, waiting. He sighed. I've got extra split shakes at the ranch for the roof. You can have them. Elena straightened. I can't pay you. Didn't ask you to. He turned to Cora. Come on, we'll bring the wagon up tomorrow. Cora smiled. First real smile Marcus had seen in. He couldn't remember how long. And he thought, maybe the widow wasn't so crazy after all. They built the cabin in 3 weeks. Elena, Cora, and on weekends, Marcus, 10 feet by 14. Logs chinked with clay, Elena found where one of the skid trails cut deep. Sod roof, seeded with grass so it would hold together in wind. Stone chimney, built from rocks Cora hauled up from the creek. One window facing east, so Elena could see sunrise. The cabin sat in the lee of a rock outcrop, sheltered from the north wind. When the last shake was nailed down, Marcus stood back. "It'll hold." Elena looked at him. "Thank you." He shrugged. Cora wanted to help, but Elena saw it in his eyes. He wanted to help too. He just didn't know how to say it. November. The first real cold came. 20 below zero. The creek froze solid. The valley went white, silent. Inside the cabin, Ash slept beside the stove. Elena slept in the loft she'd built from split poles. At night, she could hear the wind tearing across the ridge, and beneath it, the faint creak of young willow stems bending, but not breaking. She wrapped herself in blankets, Thomas's pocket watch on the shelf beside her head, Emma's wooden doll in her hands, and she thought, "I'm still here. We're still here. The ridge and me, still alive, still trying." December was brutal. Snow piled 3 feet deep. Elena couldn't get down to town. The trail was impassable. She lived on the supplies she'd stored: dried venison, beans, flour. She melted snow for water, fed the stove, waited. Ash stayed close. On the coldest nights, Elena let the dog sleep in the loft with her, for warmth, for company, for the reminder that she wasn't completely alone. Christmas came. Elena marked the day by carving a notch in the doorframe. December 25th, 1882. She thought about Thomas, about Emma, about the Christmases before. When Emma would wake before dawn, excited, squealing. When Thomas would make hot cider and they'd sit by the fire and pretend they were rich enough for real presents. This year, Elena sat alone. No cider, no presents, just silence, cold, memory. She pulled out her mother's journal, the one with blank pages. And for the first time since burying Emma, she wrote. Not much, just December 25th, first winter on Section 14. Cold. But the cabin holds. Ash is well. The ridge is sleeping under snow. I wonder if the roots remember what's above them. If they're waiting for spring, I am. She closed the journal, set it back on the shelf, and felt something. Not happiness, not even hope, just purpose. The smallest flicker of it, but it was there. January. The cold deepened. 30 below. The kind of cold that splits trees. Elena heard them crack in the night. Sharp sounds, like gunshots. She worried about the young shoots, the willow stakes, whether they'd survive. But there was nothing she could do except wait and trust that the roots knew what they were doing. February. The snow started to melt. Slowly. The days got longer, the sun higher. Elena could finally get down to town. She needed supplies, flour, salt, lamp oil. She walked into the general store, and the women there stopped talking, stared, like they'd seen a ghost. One of them, Mrs. Whitley, store owner's wife, said, "We thought you'd left." Elena set her list on the counter. "I'm still here." Mrs. Whitley looked at the list, looked at Elena. "You made it through winter. Up there." "Yes." "Alone." "Yes." The women exchanged glances. Something in their expressions shifted. Not quite respect, but recognition that maybe, just maybe, this widow was tougher than she looked. March. The snow melted in earnest. Water everywhere, running down the ridge in streams. And Elena's channels, her holding ponds. They caught it, held it. The water soaked into the ground instead of sheeting off, exactly like she'd planned. Elena walked the ridge, checking every stump, every willow stake, every pond. And she found life. The shoots had survived. Not all of them. Some had frozen back. But most were still there, still green, still reaching. The willows had grown 3 feet in one season, their roots spreading underground, weaving through the soil, holding the slope together. Elena crouched beside the first stump she'd touched, the one from that first walk, last April. The shoots were taller now, a foot, maybe more. And at the base, new buds, ready to burst. She pressed her hand to the stump, felt the rough wood, and whispered, "We made it." April. 1 year since Elena claimed Section 14. She sat on the ponderosa stump, the same one she'd used as a table, a workbench, a seat. Ash lay at her feet, older now, grayer around the muzzle. The valley below was greening, meadows, fields, creek bottom, and up here, on the ridge, green too. Not like the valley, not lush, but present, visible, real. Cora climbed up on a Saturday morning, stood beside Elena, looked at the ridge. "It's working." Elena nodded. "It's working." That night, Elena sat in her cabin, lamp burning low. She pulled out her mother's journal, turned to a new page, and wrote, April 1883, 1 year on Section 14. The ridge is alive. The stumps are growing. The water is holding. I don't know what I'm doing, but the roots seem to. So I'll follow them, see where they lead. She closed the journal, looked at Emma's doll on the shelf, Thomas's watch beside it, and she thought, I'm not the same person who buried you. I don't know if I'm better, but I'm here. And I'm growing, just like the stumps, just like the ridge. Broken, but not finished. Outside, the wind moved through the young trees, making a sound like soft rain, and Elena, for the first time in over a year, slept without crying. Year 2 started with mud. Spring 1883. The snowmelt came fast, heavy, water everywhere, running down the ridge in sheets. And Elena stood in the rain, watching. Because this was the test. Would her channels hold? Would the ponds overflow and wash out? Would 2 seasons of work disappear in one storm? She stood there, soaked, shivering, ash beside her, equally wet, equally stubborn. And she watched. The water hit the brush walls, slowed, pooled. The channels caught the flow, directed it. The holding ponds filled, but didn't breach. The water soaked in. Instead of sheeting off, taking topsoil with it, it worked. It actually worked. Elena laughed. First time in. She couldn't remember how long. Laughed out loud in the rain like a crazy person, which maybe she was. But the ridge was holding. The roots were drinking. And that was all that mattered. Marcus Webb brought his daughter up in April. Official visit this time, not sneaking. He stood at the edge of Elena's work site and looked around. At the channels, the ponds, the willow thickets already knee-high, at the stump shoots reaching toward the sky, some of them 6 feet tall now, straight as fence rails. He turned to Elena. I need 200 poles. By August. Can you do it? Elena blinked. 200. For fencing. My north pasture. She looked at her young trees. Some were ready. Most weren't. I can do 60. Maybe 80. Marcus nodded. I'll take what you've got. He named a price. Fair. More than fair. Elena stared at him. That's too much. That's what the mill in Prescott Junction charges, plus hauling fees. He paused. You're closer. Your poles are straighter. And my daughter says you know what you're doing. Cora, standing behind her father, tried not to smile. Failed. Elena looked at the girl, then at Marcus. All right. They shook on it. And Elena had her first real customer. She harvested in July, not clear-cutting, thinning, walking the ridge the way her mother had taught her, choosing which trees to take and which to leave. The crooked ones, the crowded ones, the ones shading out stronger neighbors. She left the straightest, the healthiest, the ones with the best root connections. Every tree she removed. Let more light and water reach the ones that stayed. Cora helped, learning to read the forest, learning which cuts helped and which hurt. How do you know? Cora asked, standing beside a cluster of aspen shoots, 5 growing from one stump. Elena pointed. See how these 3 are straight, strong, good spacing. Yes. And these 2, bent, crowding the others. Yes. We take the weak ones, leave the strong ones. The stump will put all its energy into the 3 that remain. They'll grow faster, taller, better. Cora touched one of the bent shoots. It seems mean. Elena looked at the girl. It's not mean. It's honest. The weak ones wouldn't make it anyway. This way. Their sacrifice helps the strong ones survive. She paused. That's how forests work, how families work. You give what you can, even if what you can give is space. Cora was quiet. Then, my mother used to say that. Say what? That sometimes the best thing you can do for someone is get out of their way. Elena's throat tightened. She was right. They worked in silence after that. But it was comfortable silence. The kind that doesn't need filling. Marcus came for the poles in August. Brought a wagon. 2 of his ranch hands. They loaded 63 aspen poles. 8 to 12 feet long. Straight. Smooth. Perfect for fencing. Marcus inspected each one. Nodded his approval. Paid Elena in silver dollars. Counted them into her hand. $28. More money than Elena had seen since selling the homestead. She stared at the coins. This is too much. That's the price we agreed on. I know, but... Marcus closed her fingers around the coins. Mrs. Hartwell, you did good work. This is what good work costs. He climbed onto the wagon, looked back. I'll be back in October for more, if you've got them. And he left. Elena stood there, holding 28 silver dollars, and she thought, this is real. This might actually work. Word spread. By September, 3 other ranchers came asking about poles, about willow bundles for fence repair, about seedlings for windbreaks. Elena hadn't planned to run a nursery, but she had seedlings, dozens of them, growing in beds she'd built from composted clover and leaf mold, watered by the holding ponds, sheltered from wind by the older trees. Aspen, cottonwood, willow, and a few ponderosa pine, started from seed she'd collected on the north slopes, where the logging crews had left a handful of old-growth trees standing, too far from the skid trails to bother with. The seedlings were sturdy, well-rooted, ready to move. Lena sold her first batch in late September. 40 seedlings to Samuel Pierce, the same man who'd bet she'd be gone by winter. He didn't apologize, but he paid. And he said, grudging, these better take. Elena looked at him. They'll take, if you water them. I know how to plant a tree. Do you? She handed him a sheet of paper. Instructions, handwritten, hole depth, spacing, watering schedule. Samuel stared at the paper, then at Elena. You're serious? You want them to live? Follow the instructions. He folded the paper, tucked it in his pocket, and left without another word. But 3 weeks later, he came back. They took. Elena nodded. Good. I need 40 more for the west fence. And that was that. Winter came early that year. First snow in October. But Elena was ready. She'd stocked the cabin with supplies, firewood, food, lamp oil. She'd winterized the nursery beds, mulched heavy, covered with burlap, and she'd prepared herself for the loneliness, the isolation, the long dark nights with nothing but her thoughts. Except this year was different because Cora came, even in winter, not every week, but once a month, sometimes twice. She'd ski up the trail on snowshoes her father made her, bring news from town, help Elena clear snow from the cabin roof, sit by the fire and talk about her mother, about school, about the future. "What do you want to do?" Elena asked one night. February. Blizzard howling outside. Cora thought, "I want to work with trees." Elena looked up from her mending. "Like this. Maybe. I don't know. I just like how they grow, how they're patient, how they don't give up." She paused. "My mother gave up." Elena set down the mending. "Your mother got sick." "I know. But at the end, she stopped fighting. She just let go." Cora's voice, small. "I was angry at her for leaving." Elena moved to sit beside the girl. "She didn't want to leave you." "How do you know?" "Because I'm a mother, and I know that the worst part of dying, when you have a child, isn't the dying. It's knowing you won't see them grow up." Cora looked at Elena. "Your daughter, Emma." "Yes." "Do you think she was scared?" Elena's breath caught. Because yes, Emma had been scared at the end, crying for her mother, asking why it hurt, why the medicine wasn't working. Elena had lied, told her it would be okay, told her she'd feel better soon, even when she knew Emma was dying and couldn't stop it. She swallowed. "Yes, she was scared." Cora nodded, like she'd expected that answer. "I'm sorry." "Me too." They sat in silence, the fire crackling, wind screaming outside. And Elena thought, this girl, this sad, brave, curious girl, needed someone to tell her the truth, needed someone who wouldn't look away from the hard things. So Elena decided she'd be that someone. Spring 1884, year 3. The ridge transformed, not dramatically, gradually, like watching a child grow. You don't notice day to day. But then one morning, you look and realize everything's different. The aspen shoots were trees now, 10, 12 feet tall, trunks thick as Elena's wrist. The willows had formed thickets, dense, green, alive. The holding ponds, permanent now. Edges lined with sedge and rush, frogs living in them, which meant birds came to eat the frogs, and the birds brought seeds in their droppings. Seeds Elena hadn't planted, wild rose, choke cherry, serviceberry. The ridge was regenerating itself. Without her help, she walked it one morning in May, ash at her heels, and she saw a whole ecosystem coming back. Not the same as before the logging, different, younger, messier, but alive, so alive. Daniel Cross was the first outsider to notice. Mail carrier. Rode the canyon road twice a week, between Garnet Falls and Dutchman's Flat mining camp. He'd passed below Section 14 for 3 years. Barely looked up. Just another logged ridge. But in April of 1885, he looked and stopped his horse because the ridge was green. Not patchy green, not scrub grass. This was forest green, layers of it. Young aspen canopy, darker cottonwood beneath, silver green willow shimmer along channels that caught the light. He stared, rode closer, saw the channels clearly now. Water flowing between the trees, deliberate, organized, like someone had planned it. Someone had. Daniel told everyone in Garnet Falls that night. Some believed him. Most didn't. But within a week, a handful of riders detoured past the ridge to see for themselves. Every one of them came back with the same expression, bewildered, like they'd seen something impossible. "It's trees," Daniel told Marcus Webb at the livery. "Growing trees, thick as your arm, straight as fence rails." He shook his head. "And there's water up there, little ponds, channels running between the stumps." He paused. "It looks like someone planned it." Marcus smiled. "Small. Someone did. People started coming to the ridge. Not many, but enough. Curious ranchers, skeptical neighbors, women from town who'd heard the stories. Elena was polite but wary. She didn't want spectators, didn't want her work turned into entertainment. But some people came with real questions. How'd you do it? Can this work on burned land? What about slopes too steep to plow? And Elena found herself teaching, not formally, just answering questions, showing them the channels, the coppicing, the willow planting. Some people listened, wrote things down, thanked her and left. Others dismissed it. Lucky rain year. She had good stumps to start with. Won't last. Elena didn't argue, just kept working, because the ridge would prove itself, or it wouldn't. Talk was cheap. Results were everything. Ruth Keene arrived in June of 1885. 19 years old, thin, hollow-eyed. She walked into Garnet Falls on a Wednesday afternoon, covered in dust, alone. Asked at the general store about the woman on the ridge, the one who grew forests from stumps. Mrs. Whitley gave her directions, looked concerned. "You all right, dear?" Ruth nodded, lied. "I'm fine." She wasn't fine. She'd walked 20 miles from what used to be her family's ranch before the fire. The fire had come in August, year before. Lightning strike, dry summer, wind. The grass went up like kindling. Ruth's father tried to fight it. Her mother, 2 brothers, they all tried. The fire didn't care. It took the house, the barn, the hayfield, and Ruth's father, trying to save the horses. Her mother and brothers made it to the creek, survived. But her mother never recovered. Grief, shock. Something broke inside her. She died in January, quietly, in her sleep. Ruth's brothers went to live with an uncle in Wyoming. They asked Ruth to come. She said no, because she couldn't leave, couldn't start over somewhere else, couldn't pretend the ranch, her family, had never existed. So she stayed, on burned ground, in a tent beside the creek, trying to figure out what came next. And then she heard about Elena, about the widow who took ruined land and made it grow. So Ruth walked 20 miles to ask if burned land could come back, the way logged land had. Elena was transplanting seedlings when Ruth arrived, hands black with soil, ash lying in the shade. She looked up, saw a girl, young, exhausted, determined, standing at the edge of the work site. Elena straightened. "You lost." Ruth shook her head. "I'm looking for Mrs. Hartwell." "You found her." Ruth stepped closer. I heard you grew a forest from stumps." Elena wiped her hands on her apron. "I'm helping one grow back. There's a difference. Can it work on burned land?" Elena studied the girl, saw something familiar, loss, raw and recent. Depends on the burn. Hot, fast, took everything. How long ago? Almost a year. Elena nodded. Roots probably survived. Fire leaves ash, which is the best fertilizer there is. She paused. Faster than logged land, if you know what you're doing. Ruth's eyes brightened just a little. "Can you teach me?" Elena looked at her, at this girl who'd walked 20 miles, to ask a question, to find hope. And Elena thought, no, I don't have room for this. Don't have energy for someone else's grief. I barely have energy for my own. But she heard herself say, "You can stay for a week. See if you like the work." Ruth nodded. "Thank you." Elena went back to her seedlings, trying to ignore the voice in her head, the one that said, "You just made a mistake." Ruth worked like someone trying to outrun ghosts. Fast, focused, relentless. Elena gave her tasks, clearing brush, deepening channels, transplanting willow. Ruth did them all, without complaint, without conversation, just work. Cora came up that Saturday, found Ruth hauling rocks for a new holding pond. The 2 girls looked at each other, wary. Who are you? Cora asked. Ruth. You working here now? For a week. Cora looked at Elena. Elena shrugged. She asked to learn. Cora turned back to Ruth. You know anything about trees? No. Water management? No. So what do you know? Ruth set down the rock. I know what it's like to lose everything. And I know I'm not ready to give up yet. Cora softened just a little. Okay. She picked up a rock. I'll help. And just like that, 3 women, 3 generations, 3 different kinds of loss, working side by side. The week passed. Ruth stayed. Elena didn't ask her to, didn't tell her to go. Just let her stay. Ruth slept in the corner of the cabin, on a bedroll she'd brought, ate little, talked less. But she worked, every day, sunrise to sunset, like the work was medicine. Maybe it was. July brought drought, the worst in 5 years. No rain for 6 weeks. The creek below dropped, then dropped more. Ranchers worried. Cattle needed water. Gardens withered. Wells ran low. On the ridge, Elena's holding ponds held, not full, but present. The water she'd collected in spring, stored in the soil, released slowly through summer. The trees survived, stressed, but alive. And one morning, Marcus Webb rode up, looking, worried. Mrs. Hartwell. Marcus, I've got a problem. He dismounted. My creek section dried up, completely. I've got 100 head with no water. He paused. I saw your ponds from below. Elena waited. Can I bring some cattle up here? Just until the rain comes? Elena looked at her ponds, at the water she'd worked 3 years to capture, to hold. She could say no, keep it for the trees, for the ridge, or she could say yes and help. Bring them up. Marcus exhaled. I'll pay you. You don't have to. I want to. Elena nodded. All right. Marcus's cattle drank from Elena's ponds for 3 weeks, until the rains finally came in August. And when Marcus settled his account, he paid double what they'd agreed for saving my herd. Elena tried to refuse. Marcus wouldn't let her. You did more than save cattle, Mrs. Hartwell. You proved something. What? This. What you're doing. It's not just about trees. He looked at the ridge. It's about water. About land management. About thinking long-term instead of just next season. He turned to her. People are noticing. But not everyone noticed the same way. Late August, Ruth, working the north pond, looked up, saw smoke, rising from the valley. Not chimney smoke, wildfire smoke. Her breath stopped, because she knew that smoke, knew the smell, the color, the way it moved. She stood, frozen. Elena saw her face. Ruth. No answer. Ruth. The girl blinked, turned. Fire. Elena looked, saw the smoke. It's south of town, 5 miles at least. Ruth shook her head. It doesn't matter. Wind's blowing north. It'll spread. Her voice, rising. It'll take everything. Again. Elena grabbed her shoulders. Ruth, look at me. Ruth's eyes, wild. I can't do this again. You won't have to. You don't know that. Look around. Elena gestured to the ridge. We're surrounded by green, moist ground, water channels. This isn't dry grass. Fire won't run here. But Ruth was. Somewhere else, back on her family's ranch, watching the flames. She pulled away from Elena. I have to go. Go where? Away. Anywhere. I can't. She was backing up, shaking. Ruth, I'm sorry. I can't. And she ran down the trail, toward town, away. Cora came running from the cabin. What happened? Elena stared at the trail, at the space where Ruth had been. She's scared. Of the fire. Of losing again. Cora looked at the smoke, then at Elena. Are we safe here? Elena looked at her ridge, at the green, at the water. Yes. She said it with more confidence than she felt, but she said it because Cora needed to hear it. The fire burned for 2 days, took out 300 acres of rangeland, threatened Dutchman's flat mining camp. But the wind shifted. Rain came. The fire died. No one was hurt. No buildings lost. Just grass, which would grow back. But Ruth didn't come back. A week passed. 2. Elena asked in town. No one had seen her. She'd left. That's what people said. Headed east, or south, or somewhere. Gone. Elena told herself it was fine. The girl had her own life, her own choices. It wasn't Elena's job to save her. Except she couldn't stop thinking about Ruth's face, the fear in it, the brokenness. And Elena knew that look, had worn it herself, after Thomas, after Emma. That look that said, I can't survive another loss, so I'll leave before I can lose anything else. September. Elena worked, but her heart wasn't in it. She kept looking at the space where Ruth had slept, at the tools Ruth had used. And she thought, I should have done more, said more, something. Cora noticed. You miss her. Elena looked up from her work. Who? Ruth. You miss her. I barely knew her. That doesn't mean you can't miss her. Cora sat down beside Elena. My father says people leave for two reasons. Because they don't care, or because they care too much. Elena was quiet. Then, which one was Ruth? The second one. Cora paused. Which one are you? Elena looked at the girl. What do you mean? You left your homestead after Emma died. Was it because you didn't care? Or because you cared too much? The question hit hard. Because Elena had never thought about it that way. She'd left because staying hurt. Because every corner of that homestead held memories. Because she couldn't bear to walk past Emma's empty bed. Because she cared too much and couldn't survive it. The second one, Elena whispered. Cora nodded. That's why Ruth left too. October came. First frost. Elena prepared for winter. Alone again. Except for Cora's weekend visits. And Ash, who was getting old. 7 now. Maybe 8. Elena wasn't sure. Slower. Grayer. But still. Loyal. Still followed Elena everywhere. Still lay at her feet while she worked. One evening, Elena sat on the ponderosa stump, watching sunset, Ash beside her. And she thought about the year, about Ruth, about how close she'd come, to opening up, to trusting someone new, to maybe building something bigger than just her and the ridge. And then Ruth had left, and Elena was alone again, which was fine. She'd always been alone, except she hadn't. Not really. Cora was there. Marcus, in his own way. The people who bought her seedlings, who asked her questions, who saw what she was doing and wanted to learn. She wasn't alone. She just convinced herself she was. Because being alone was safer, simpler, less chance of losing someone again. But was that living or just surviving? Elena didn't know. November. First snow. Elena was splitting firewood when she heard footsteps. She turned, saw someone walking up the trail. Thin, familiar. Ruth. Elena set down the axe. Waited. Ruth stopped at the edge of the work site. Looked. Terrible. Exhausted. Dirty. Like she'd been walking for days. I'm sorry, she said. Elena didn't move. For what? For running. For leaving. For Ruth's voice broke. For being a coward. Elena crossed the space between them, slowly. You're not a coward. I ran. You were scared. I'm always scared. Ruth looked at the ground. I'm scared I'll care about something and it'll burn. I'm scared I'll build something and it'll fall. I'm scared I'll trust that things can grow back. And they won't. Tears on her face now. I don't know how you do it, how you keep trying after losing everything. Elena was quiet. Then she told Ruth something she'd never told anyone. Not Cora, not Marcus, not even herself, out loud. I don't know if things can grow back either. Ruth looked up. But I know that if I don't try, if I just give up, then Emma died for nothing. Elena's voice, shaking now. She died because I couldn't save her. Because I didn't know enough, wasn't fast enough, wasn't enough. She swallowed, and I can't bring her back, can't undo it, can't make it not have happened. Pause. But I can. I can take what I learned from my mother, from the years working land with Thomas, from everything, and I can use it to help something else live. She looked at the ridge. These trees, this forest, it's not a replacement, not compensation. It's just the only thing I know how to do. That feels like living instead of just waiting to die. Ruth stared at her, and Elena saw recognition, understanding, the kind that only comes from shared pain. I'm scared it won't work, Ruth whispered. So am I. I'm scared I'll fail. So am I. But you keep going anyway. Elena nodded. Because what else is there? Ruth wiped her face. Can I still stay? Elena looked at this girl, this broken, brave, terrified girl, and she thought, yes, you can stay. We're all broken here. We might as well be broken together. You can stay. Ruth exhaled, like she'd been holding her breath for months, and maybe she had. Thank you. Elena turned back to her firewood. Don't thank me yet. Winter's coming, and you're on splitting duty. Ruth picked up the spare axe, smiled. Small, but real. Yes, ma'am. That winter, 3 of them. Elena, Ruth, Cora when she could come. Working together. Not always talking, not always agreeing, but together. Elena taught them how to read root systems, how to choose which trees to thin, how to build beds for seedlings, how to wait patiently for things to grow. And the girls taught Elena how to laugh again, how to see the ridge through younger eyes, how to hope, not for certainty, but for possibility. That maybe, just maybe, broken things could grow back. Not the same, never the same, but new, different, alive. Spring 1886, year 4. The ridge was undeniable now. Young forest, real forest. Aspen canopy reaching 20 feet. Cottonwood beneath. Willow thickets. Water channels lined with rushes and wild iris. Birds nesting, deer grazing, life everywhere. Elena walked it one morning, Ruth and Cora beside her, Ash trailing behind. Slower now, but still there. And Elena thought, 4 years ago, I came here to disappear, to hide, to maybe die quietly. And instead, I built this. We built this. Not just a forest, but a family. Strange, broken, mismatched, but family. She looked at Ruth, at Cora, at these girls who'd found her. Or maybe she'd found them. And she realized the ridge wasn't just growing back. She was too. Winter came early. October 1886. First hard freeze before the leaves had finished turning. Snow by November. And by January, the temperature dropped 30 below zero, then lower. Wind came off the northern peaks, steady, relentless, sounding like freight trains running through empty tunnels. The valley suffered. Cattle died. Marcus Webb lost 14 head in a single night. Temperature fell faster than anyone could get the herd to shelter. 2 families lost cabins to wind damage. The wagon road drifted shut. Mail stopped running. Old-timers in Garnet Falls said, worst winter since '79. On the ridge, Elena, Ruth, Cora when she could make it up. Watched the young forest bend under snow. The aspen trunks, flexible, strong, flexed in the wind, but didn't snap. The willow thickets held the hillside together, their woven roots gripping frozen soil like 10,000 small hands. The holding ponds, frozen on the surface, but storing water beneath the ice, water that would feed the roots. When the thaw came, snow piled deep among the trees, insulating the ground, protecting root systems from the killing cold that was splitting fence posts in the valley below. Elena stood at the cabin window one morning, watching, always watching, Ruth beside her. Will they make it? Ruth asked. Elena didn't answer right away because she didn't know. Had never tested the ridge against cold this extreme. Finally, the roots are deep. The trees are spaced right. We did what we could. She paused. Now we wait. The cold broke in mid-February. Temperature rose. Slowly, snow began to melt. And when Elena could finally walk the ridge again, she counted. Losses. Some young pines, frozen. A few aspen. Split trunks. Maybe 20 trees total. Out of hundreds, less than 5%. The ridge had survived while the valley below fought flooding. Watched topsoil wash into the creek. Lost fences, outbuildings, grazing land. The ridge held its ground. Not a gully, not a washout. The channels Elena had built, the ponds, the willow roots, all of it worked exactly as designed. The soil stayed where she taught the water to put it. Samuel Pierce rode up in March, stood at the edge of Elena's nursery beds, looking at rows of seedlings already pushing new growth. And he said, quiet, "I called you crazy, Mrs. Hartwell." Elena looked up from her work, hands black with soil. "I remember. I was the crazy one." He paused. "I lost half my herd this winter. Creek flooded, took out my fences, washed topsoil into the valley." He gestured to the ridge. "You didn't lose anything." Elena set down her trowel. "I lost trees, same as you lost cattle." "But your land held." "Yes, mine didn't." Elena stood, wiped her hands. "Your land could, if you worked it different." Samuel looked at her. "You mean like this?" "I mean, with water in mind, with roots, with patience." She paused. "You can't force land to give you what you want. You have to work with what it's trying to do anyway." Samuel was quiet. Then, Would you come look at my place? Tell me what I'm doing wrong." Elena blinked. "You want me to tell you how to run your ranch? I want you to tell me how to keep it." Word spread. By April, 3 other ranchers asked Elena to assess their land. She walked their properties, looked at water flow, soil erosion, fence placement, made suggestions. Some listened. Some nodded politely and did nothing. But enough listened. Enough tried her methods, planting windbreaks, building small retention ponds, changing grazing patterns. And by the next year, those ranches did better, lost less, held more, and people noticed. Years 5 through 10 blurred together, not because they weren't important, but because the work became routine, good routine, satisfying routine, the kind that marks seasons instead of disasters. Elena's nursery grew, 2,000 seedlings a year, aspen, cottonwood, willow, ponderosa pine. She sold to ranchers who wanted windbreaks, to families who wanted shade trees, to the mining company at Dutchman's Flat, which needed timber for shoring tunnel walls, and was willing to pay well for fast-growing stock that could be planted nearby. Instead of hauled 40 miles from a mill, no one else in the territory could supply what Elena supplied, because no one else had thought to grow trees on purpose in a land where most people were still cutting them down. Ruth started her own restoration project, 1889, on her family's burned land. She used everything Elena had taught her: water channels, ash fertilizer, coppicing, willow planting, patience. The first year, nothing visible. The second year, green shoots. By the third year, the burned slope looked alive again. Ruth built a nursery, smaller than Elena's, but successful. She called it Keene's Forest Nursery. Tried to name it after Elena. Elena refused. "This is yours, your work, your land, your name." Ruth argued. Elena won. The nursery thrived, and Ruth, who'd arrived hollow-eyed and broken, became someone else, someone whole, or close enough. Cora Webb turned 23 in 1891, Tall, capable, confident. She'd spent 6 years learning from Elena, learning to read land, water, roots, growth patterns. A territorial land agent visited the ridge that summer, saw what Elena had done, asked questions, took notes, and when he left, he took Cora with him, offered her a position, surveying logged and burned lands across Montana territory, assessing recovery potential, recommending restoration methods. Marcus was conflicted, proud, but worried. "She's a woman," he said to Elena. "They'll never take her seriously." Elena smiled. "She's your daughter. They won't have a choice." Cora became the first woman territorial forester, not officially, but functionally. She walked land, made recommendations, and people listened because she knew what she was talking about, and because Elena had taught her that knowledge doesn't care about gender. It just is. By 1892, 10 years after Elena claimed Section 14, the ridge was unrecognizable. Where there had been stumps and mud, there was now working forest, not wild, managed. Elena walked it every day, reading the trees, deciding where to thin, where to plant, where to let the forest do its own work. She had 20 acres of mature coppice timber, producing poles and building stock on a 5-year rotation, 6 acres of nursery beds, producing 2,000 seedlings annually, willow plantations along every water channel. And she'd begun experimenting with grafting, joining hardy native rootstock to fruit-bearing branches, trying to produce apple and plum trees, tough enough to survive at altitude. Some worked, some didn't. But the ones that worked were remarkable. Ash died in October of 1892, quietly, on a warm afternoon, lying in the sun, beside the big ponderosa stump, the one Elena still used as a workbench. She was 9, maybe 10. Elena had never been sure. Gray now, slow, but loyal to the end. Elena found her there, still warm, but gone. And something in Elena's chest cracked, because Ash had been there, through everything, from the first day in Coulter County, through every season, every winter, every doubt. Ash had been constant, steady. There, Elena buried her. Beneath the ponderosa stump, planted a young aspen over the grave. And that night, alone in the cabin, she wept for the first time since burying Thomas and Emma. She wept for Ash, for her family, for everything she'd lost, for everything she'd found, for the sheer, exhausting, beautiful weight of 10 years of trying. Ruth found her in the morning, eyes red, face swollen. Didn't say anything, just sat beside her, held her hand, and that was enough. A week later, a pup appeared, half-grown, gray, long-legged, amber-eyed. She came out of the timber at dusk, sat at the edge of the nursery beds, watching Elena work. Elena ignored her. The pup stayed. For 3 days, just watching. On the 4th day, Elena fed her. Dried venison. The pup took it, gentle, and stayed. Elena named her Ash because some things continue. The years between 1892 and 1902 were full, not of drama, but of work, teaching, building. 3 other women bought logged or burned land, used Elena's methods. 2 were managed by men who'd spent weeks watching Elena work. Before starting on their own land, the 3rd was a young woman named May Larson, who'd lost her family's ranch to a grass fire and walked 15 miles to ask Elena if burned slopes could come back. Elena told her what she'd told Ruth. Faster than logged land, fire leaves, roots, and ash. May's slope was green within 2 years. She named her nursery Hartwell Method Restoration. Elena asked her not to. May ignored her. People need to know where this came from, who taught it. And Elena realized she wasn't just growing trees anymore. She was growing a movement, small, quiet, but real. Elena began teaching, formally. Not lectures, not pamphlets, just when people came to buy seedlings, she showed them how to plant. When ranchers asked why their windbreaks died, she walked their land, showed them where the water went and where it didn't. She kept a journal, not a diary, a record of what she planted, where, when, what happened, rainfall, frost dates, soil conditions, which seedlings took, which failed. By 1895, she had 13 years of records. The territorial land agent asked to copy them. For his office, Elena agreed on one condition. They have to be available to anyone who asks. The agent nodded. Of course. Elena looked at him. I mean it. Not just officials. Not just men. Anyone. Why? Because knowledge isn't like timber. You don't use it up by sharing it. She paused. It grows. In 1899, Elena turned 45. Her hands were thick with calluses. Her face lined by sun and wind. Her hair streaked with gray. She moved slower on steep parts of the ridge, but she still walked it every morning, the second ash padding behind. And she still read the trees with the same careful attention her mother had taught her as a girl in Pennsylvania, translating lessons learned in the Black Forest to a mountainside in Montana. She thought about her mother sometimes, Annika, who died while Elena was building her homestead with Thomas. Before Emma was born, what would she think of this place? This ridge, this forest. Elena liked to think she'd be proud, not for the trees themselves, but for remembering, for keeping the knowledge alive, for passing it on. The photographer came in May of 1902, 20 years after Elena claimed Section 14. His name was William Hart. From the Territorial Survey, he'd seen the land agent's report, wanted to document what he called the most remarkable example of land recovery in the Northern Territories. Elena was 48 by then, still strong, still working, but softer somehow, around the edges, like the years had worn away. The sharpest parts of her grief left something gentler behind. William took pictures. The young forest, the holding ponds, the nursery beds, the willow-lined channels. And then he asked Elena to stand beside the big ponderosa stump for a portrait. "People will want to know who did this," he said. Elena shook her head. "The ridge did it. I just cleared the brush." But she stood for the photograph anyway, one hand resting on the stump, the other hanging at her side, ash sitting at her feet. She didn't smile, but there was something in her expression that William later described in his notes as settled, not proud, not triumphant, settled, like a person who has found the place where their work and the world's need meet, and who intends to stay. That evening, William asked Elena how she'd done it. They sat on the cabin porch, watching the sun go down, the valley below turning gold. And Elena told him, not the simple version, the real one. "I came here 20 years ago because I'd lost everything. My husband, my daughter, my future." She paused. "I claimed this land because it looked how I felt, stripped, empty, broken. And I thought, if I could make this grow back, maybe I could grow back too." William wrote in his notebook, "Did you?" Elena thought about that. "I'm not the same person who came here. That woman, she died with Thomas and Emma. But I'm not gone either." She gestured to the ridge. "I'm this, whatever this is, whoever this is. Someone who knows. That being broken doesn't mean being finished." William looked at his notes, then at Elena. "What do you want people to know when they see these photographs?" Elena was quiet. Then, "That roots run deeper than anyone thinks, and they're patient, and they're waiting. All they need is someone who knows how to look down, instead of just looking around." The photograph was published in a territorial newspaper that fall. Beneath it, the caption read, "Mrs. Elena Hartwell of Coulter County," beside the stump from which her forest grew. Elena cut the caption out, pinned it inside her cabin, above the door, where she could see it when she came in from work. By then, 3 other logged-over hillsides in the territory had been replanted using her methods: holding ponds, coppice management, willow staking, clover, Two run by men who'd spent a week watching Elena work before going home and starting on their own land. The third, managed by May Larson, who'd lost her ranch to fire and found hope on a burned slope that came back green faster than anyone expected. That was 1902, but Elena's story didn't end there. It was just beginning to multiply. Elena taught until she was 72, not in a classroom, but on the land. People came from 3 counties to see the Hartwell Ridge, to ask questions, to learn. Elena showed them, patiently, how to read stumps, how to build channels, how to wait. Some people got it, some didn't. But the ones who got it changed things in small ways on their own land. And those small ways added up. Ruth Keene ran the largest native plant nursery in Montana by 1905, employed 6 people, sold seedlings to restoration projects across 4 states. She never married, said she didn't need to. I have my trees, my work, my purpose. She visited Elena once a month until Elena died. They'd sit on the cabin porch, drinking tea, watching the forest, not talking much, not needing to. Cora Webb became the Territorial Forester. Official title, 1910. First woman to hold the position. She fought for it, faced men who said women couldn't do field work, couldn't assess timber, couldn't make hard decisions. She proved them wrong by knowing more than they did, by outworking them, by being right more often than they were. She married at 35 to a surveyor who respected her work, had 3 children, taught them all to read trees, to respect land, to remember that broken can become whole if you're patient. Elena's last years were quiet. She stopped working the ridge daily, her body too tired, hands too stiff. But she walked it every morning with Ash, the third Ash by then, granddaughter of the original, and she sat on the big ponderosa stump, watching, remembering Thomas, Emma, her mother, the first Ash, all the people and creatures who'd walked this ridge with her, who weren't here anymore, but whose presence she still felt in the roots, in the trees, in the work. That continued without her. She died in her sleep. October 1926, 72 years old, in the cabin she'd built with her own hands 44 years earlier. Ruth found her on a morning visit, still, peaceful, like she'd just slipped away. Ruth buried her beside the ponderosa stump, next to the first Ash, planted an aspen over the grave, and stood there with Cora, with May Larson, with dozens of others who'd learned from Elena, who'd been changed by her, and they told stories about the widow who grew a forest, about the woman who taught them that patience is power, that knowledge grows when shared, that broken doesn't mean finished. The ridge continued after Elena, because that's what she'd built, not a monument, a living system that didn't need her to keep going. Ruth managed it for 20 years, then passed it to May, who passed it to her daughter, who passed it to hers. Always women, always the ones who understood that this wasn't just trees. It was legacy, memory, proof that what we nurture outlives us. In 1950, a forestry student from the university came to study the Hartwell Ridge for her thesis. She was 22, bright, ambitious. She'd read about Elena in the archives, wanted to see if the method still worked. 70 years later, she walked the ridge with Ruth's granddaughter, who managed it now, and she saw mature forest, 80-foot aspens, cottonwoods wider than her arms could reach, water channels still flowing, still feeding, still holding the slope together. "It's beautiful," the student said. Ruth's granddaughter smiled. Elena used to say, "The forest is not one generation. It's memory in roots." She paused. I finally understand what she meant. Today, Section 14 is a Montana state forest, protected land, open to hikers, students, researchers, people who want to see what one woman with knowledge, patience, grief, built from stumps. There's a plaque at the trailhead. It reads, Elena Hartwell, 1854 to 1926. Transformed this logged ridge into a working forest using traditional European coppicing methods adapted to Montana conditions. Her techniques influenced land restoration across the Western Territories and demonstrated that ecological recovery is possible with patience, knowledge, and respect for natural systems. But that's not the whole story. The whole story is a woman who lost everything and chose to grow anyway. A woman who took broken land and saw possibility. A woman who taught, not from books, but from dirt, from roots, from the quiet, stubborn belief that life wants to live if you just help it remember how. 3 generations. 3 generations walk the ridge now. Grandmother, mother, daughter, descendants of Cora Webb, who learned from Elena, who became a forester, who passed the knowledge down. They walk slowly, stopping to touch trees, to check the old channels, to see if the ponds still hold water. They do. The grandmother points to the big ponderosa stump, still there after 140 years. That's where she sat, where she worked, where she's buried. The granddaughter, 8 years old, touches the stump. What was she like the grandmother thinks. I never met her, but my grandmother did. Said Elena was quiet, strong, kind. She pauses. Said she had the saddest eyes, but the most patient hands. The little girl traces the rings in the stump. Did she ever get happy again after her daughter died? The grandmother kneels beside her. I don't know if happy is the right word, but I think she found peace in the work, in teaching, in watching things grow. Is that enough? The grandmother looks at the forest around them, at the aspen, the cottonwood, the willow, at the water channels still flowing, at the life everywhere. Yes, she says, I think it was enough. The sun sets over Coulter County. The ridge goes golden, then purple, then dark. And if you stand there, in the quiet, you can hear the wind in the aspen leaves, making a sound like soft rain. You can hear water moving through the channels, slow, patient, steady. You can hear the forest breathing, living, remembering. And if you listen, really listen, you might hear something else. A woman's voice, quiet, certain, saying what she told the photographer all those years ago. I didn't grow this forest. I just remembered what the roots knew all along. That broken can become whole. That endings hold beginnings. That patience and knowledge are the only magic we need. The ridge remembers. The roots remember. And somewhere, in the space between the trees, in the water flowing underground, in the seeds waiting for spring, Elena Hartwell is still there, still teaching, still growing, still showing us how to take what's broken and make it live again.